Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. A lot of interesting stuff going on in the world. Some GOP in disarray.
Yes,
A lot of finger pointing already about potential underperformance in the midterms. This is pretty interesting. McConnell's involved, Trump's involved, Tucker's involved, Hannity's involved. So we'll break all of that down for you. We also have some brand new polling from NBC News that is pretty interesting, very complex. I mean, you really could see this election in any number of ways. There are some numbers that are terrible for Democrats. There are some numbers that are not good for Republicans. So it's all very much less predictable than I expected it to be just a couple months ago. Also, a car bomb killing a Kremlin ally in Moscow. A lot of questions about who is responsible, what it means. Very dangerous situation, ultimately, that has the potential for escalation, putting domestic political pressure on Putin to do even more and be even more aggressive in this war. So we'll break all of that down for you. A lot of questions remain there. Also, the very latest in terms of the Trump Mar-a-Lago raid, the judge actually said, and this surprised me, the Department of Justice said, we don't want the affidavit that justified the search. We don't want that to be released. They argued in favor of keeping that completely sealed. Coalition of news organizations said, no, there is a public interest in knowing what is in this document. The judge has taken kind of a middle ground and said, hey, I think we should release it, but let's let the DOJ put in what they think should be redacted from this. So we'll break all of that down. And also, guys, I know you are heartbroken this morning. The Brian Stelter show, Reliable Sources, has officially come to an end. We're going to get through this together, guys. We'll bring you his final stirring commentary from his final show. And
it's a solemn occasion.
Yeah, indeed. Solemn occasion this morning. But before we get to any of that, live show.
Live show. Only a couple tickets left. Let's go and put it up there on the screen. September 16th, Atlanta. We are coming. Krystal, myself, many other friends of the show. It's going to be an awesome time. Go ahead and buy those. We want to officially sell this thing out, folks. Let's go ahead and do it. Like I said, only a few remaining. Go ahead and nab them. And send us an email if there are any issues. As a reminder to the lifetime members, if you had gone ahead and bought tickets, just forward your receipt as well to the customer service line, and those will be refunded closer to the day of the show. Looking forward to it. I genuinely cannot wait.
You know it is getting close because I've actually gotten my babysitting logistics for my three kids secured,
this is serious stuff.
Ready to go. So all of the obstacles have been cleared. It is happening, and it is happening in less than a month.
Fantastic.
All right, let's get to the Republicans in disarray storyline here at the top. So Mitch McConnell, go ahead and put this NBC tear sheet up on the screen, really caused a bit of a stir with some comments that he made to the Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. He says Republicans might not win Senate control, citing candidate quality. Specifically, here were his comments, Saagar. He says, I think there's probably a greater likelihood the House flips than the Senate. Senate races are just different. Candidate quality has a lot to do with the outcome. Now, when you are the once and potentially future majority leader, Mitch McConnell on the Republican side, and you are outright admitting this far from Election Day that you think the Senate might not flip, I mean, that in and of itself is quite noteworthy.
Oh, it's huge.
And it's very much seen as shots fired at Trump because it's a lot of his chosen candidates who are really underperforming here. Let's go ahead and put the 538 numbers up on the screen. And, guys, this can change. The polls have been very wrong. They have consistently underestimated Republicans. So I really want you to keep all of that in mind as we're evaluating this data. But as of right now, Democrats are favored by 63% to 37% to win control of the Senate. They are feeling so bullish that there are some who are starting to whisper maybe we'll not just keep control of the Senate. Maybe we will actually pick up a few seats and pick up a little bit of ground. Now, the candidates who are kind of widely seen as underperforming are, we've talked about all of them here, Herschel Walker, Dr. Oz, certainly. Those two are top of the list. Also, J.D. Vance in Ohio, who is by quite a lot of polls, including their own Republican internals, down to Tim Ryan right now. Blake Masters out in Arizona. All four of these seats should have been basically layups for Republicans with the overall political landscape that we're facing. And not only are they struggling in some of these seats, they are just outright losing, and it's pretty hard to deny. The last piece that I'll put up here before getting your reaction, Saagar, is part of the problem, and that reveals a lot about flagging Republican sort of enthusiasm and momentum. The fundraising numbers for these Republicans almost across the board is pretty dismal. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. Huge disparities. I know it's a little bit hard to see, but I'll read you some of the numbers here between the Democratic candidates and what they have cash on hand and the Republican candidates. So as a couple of examples, down in Georgia, you have Raphael Warnock with $22 million in the bank versus Herschel Walker, who's actually in better shape than most of the other Republicans with $6.8 million, but still a massive disparity there. You've got Mark Kelly out in Arizona with $25 million cash on hand versus Blake Masters only has $1.5 million. And this one is really quite stunning. Tim Ryan pulling in $3.6 million. That's his cash on hand status. That's what he has in the bank. J.D. Vance, less than $1 million, only $600,000 in his bank account at the end of last quarter. And this is consistent, something we've been tracking, sort of at every level. The grassroots fundraising has dried up. There's a lot of questions about how the National Republican Senatorial Committee has been spending their money. They blew through a whole wad of cash and now are having to pull ads down in key battleground states. They're having to spend money in places like Ohio that they really didn't think they were going to have to spend money on in order to win. And so there are a lot of structural issues here that are kind of cropping up for the Republicans.
Absolutely. And I just think, though, it's always important to present the caveats. I mean, Susan Collins was down, 10 right before Election Day? Tom Tillis was supposed to be a dead man walking in North Carolina. Right. There were a couple of other Senate seats. I mean, even if you go back to 2018, if you'll recall, Marsha Blackburn was supposedly, in a tight race. Remember also, even Jamie Harrison, they said, is like, within 2 or 3 points. I mean, he lost by 17 points.
Right.
Okay? So anyway, that's the caveat. Also, I was talking with some people who work in these circles. Their counter to this is that the Democrats are awash in post-Dobbs cash, and in a way may actually be blowing their wad a little bit too early. Part of the problem is that because right now it's in August, they have all this cash, they have the media spots available, is that the Republicans, again, this is the counter, so I am not saying this is necessarily the case. They're like, look, we're not going to spend our money in the summer. We're going to try and spend our money all the way come up to election day.
But that's obviously cope when they just don't have as much money.
Well, they don't have the money.
Right. It'd be one thing if, Democrats had raised a bunch of money and they spent it all. But Republicans are in the very bad position of, Democrats have been in a lot of these races outspending them and defining them on the airways. And we think about Fetterman and Oz, how Fetterman jumped right to. Oz isn't even on the air. And yet, they're behind in terms of fundraising. So they're in a position where they need to make up the gap with a flood of post-Labor Day advertising. And as of right now, they are very much behind. As one indication of how dire the cash situation has gotten for some of these Republicans, Blake Masters, who's the Senate nominee in Arizona, aforementioned, who was backed by Trump, and Trump really kind of cleared the field for him and put him in position to win. He also had a lot of support from Peter Thiel financially.
Used to work for him.
In the primary, used to work for him, and not clear that Thiel is going to come in for him or J.D. Vance, who was his other big candidate in the general election. So that's kind of a big question mark. But Masters, in order to win the primary, he went all in on trashing Mitch McConnell, which I'm cool with, saying he would not support him for leadership, that he was going to vote for, he said, Tom Cotton, or I don't remember, somebody else, Josh Hawley or something like that. Now that he is struggling in terms of cash and behind in cash on hand by $24 million to Mark Kelly, now he's changing his tune. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. He says he's hopeful the GOP leader is going to offer financial support. He says, I think he'll come in and spend. Arizona's going to be competitive. It's going to be a close race. I hope he does come in. And Saagar, he says, we'll find a way to work together.
Right. He
goes on to make his pitch. I mean, this is just shamelessly begging for cash here. I think I'm a much better candidate than Mitch McConnell gives me credit for, he says.
Let me just say, this has not gone unnoticed in Washington and has been passed around quite a bit in certain circles and made its way to me. And I was like, hey, it's actually a good story. I got to give it to him. So there's a lot of gloating and some closed doors here in D.C. Saying everybody trashes him till they need the money.
Until they need the cash.
Here's what people forget. Not only the NRSC, which is run by Rick Scott, but the Senate Leadership Fund, which is directly controlled by Mitch McConnell and his super PAC, is tens to hundreds of millions of dollars potentially. And look, Masters is fighting for his life. He's already down probably. See, this is the hard part to parse. farce, which is that the Vance poll, I just honestly don't believe it. I'm like, look, I think he's going to win. I think he'll probably win by like 4. He should have won by 10, but he'll probably still pull it out.
The problem for him is that they're having to spend money there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the problem for them is they're going to have to spend money, but I just don't see it. Oz, I still think it's like 55-45. I don't think it should be. I'm talking in Fetterman's direction. It's still a little bit too close, but I have confidence he might be able to pull it across the finish line, but it will be incredibly tight. Masters is legitimately, I think, in trouble because Mark Kelly, not only in terms of candidate quality, but the guy is not a nationally defined Democrat in the way that Sinema or any of the other people who are kind of up are in the same way for the media. You know, Mark Kelly did his very first Sunday interview as a senator this weekend. The guy has no profile. And I was actually doing some reading over the weekend. Almost all the interviews he gives are like to the Arizona Central or, you know, the Phoenix newspaper or something.
Yeah.
And all he talks about is like water access issues for ranchers. He's actually quite a localist politician, doesn't play up his, you know, machinations behind the scenes. Yes, votes with Biden, but very rarely seen with Biden. These are all things that I think define, you know, a popular politician. On top of, look, he's got a good bio, right? Married to Gabby Giffords, very popular in the state. There's a lot of sympathy not only for her, and he's a hero astronaut. So it's like you put those couple things together, this is a tough guy. And, you know, Masters shot himself in the foot. 2 different cases. Number one was the Griswold thing that he put on his, the birth control contraception case, you know, and he's not going to vote for any Supreme Court justice that doesn't commit to overturning that. He put it on his website in the primary. There's no reason to do that, right? Except, I mean, there literally is no reason. And second, you know, saying he wants to privatize Social Security. So you put the abortion contraception thing on one end, which he's getting bombarded with on the air. And then if I was Mark Kelly, I would just run that privatizing Social Security clip all day long.
And he is. And he is running ads on it already.
Of course he is. And that's what, if we'll recall, the way this is always funny because Sinema, now that we remember her, the way that she beat Martha McSally is Obamacare. It was all Martha McSally voted to take away Obamacare. And Martha McSally is on record saying that vote is almost definitively what sunk her in the state of Arizona. And, in her post interviews, like, even though she was like appointed and then she lost again, which is pathetic.
She was also, didn't we interview her?
We might have.
I think we interviewed her. And she was like the most wooden, just terrible candidate.
She has a nice story.
That you can possibly imagine. Yeah. I mean, you know, listen, as I keep saying, the Republican, it should be a slam dunk for a lot of these candidates. I mean, they shouldn't have to spend money in Ohio, and they're spending a lot. So the NRSC is spending $28 million, I think, in Ohio. It's a huge number that they're having to spend in Ohio to try to get J.D. Vance across the finish line. And I agree with you. It's Ohio. I don't think Tim Ryan's going to win. But you shouldn't be having to put down cash in that state. That should have been an absolute layup. So you now have a lot of Republican consultants and Senate hopefuls who were like, what the hell happened to all your money, too, at the national level? Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. This is also kind of hilarious. It's a ripoff. GOP spending under fire as Senate hopefuls seek rescue. You have all these people who are calling for an audit of the National Republican Senatorial Committee. They say they're getting, you know, the Senate hopefuls are getting crushed on the airwaves across the country while their national campaign fund is pulling ads and running low on cash, leading some campaign advisors to ask where all the money went and demand an audit of the committee's finances, according to Republican strategists involved in the discussions. The NRSC's retreat came after months of touting record fundraising, topping $173 million so far this election cycle. But the committee has burned through nearly all of it, with their cash on hand dwindling to $28 million by the end of June. So this is another, you know, we saw this in the Trump campaign too. Remember, they had that massive war chest. And we were heading into that election like, geez, the Democrats are going to be swamped by this amount of money that he's been able to raise. And then, I don't know, Brad Parscale and I don't know who else got their hands in the cookie jar, but that money was gone. And towards the end, the Trump campaign was having to pull ads in, like, you know, I think even Wisconsin and other key battleground states, because they just literally didn't have the money. And there's echoes of that here. They had plenty of money in the bank, $173 million so far, and now where is it? It's gone as you come down the stretch. And Republican online donations have flagged, so they're raising money at a slower clip. And they've had to pull their ad buys in some of these critical areas. So again, I don't know that these things are going to be determinative, and especially in a sort of national, you know, environment where a lot of what's going to happen here is going to be based on the national wins, how people feel about the country, how people feel about Joe Biden, potentially if Trump were to announce how they feel about Trump. Trump. All these other factors, certainly Dobbs plays into all of this, but it is an indication of, number one, like total disorganization, foolish decision making, and then the terrible candidates who have ended up in some of these races as the nominee.
It is funny too, because of course the establishment wing wants to blame, Trump for all of this. But hey, Rick Scott is the one running the NRSC. And by the way, I don't know if people know this, Rick Scott is worth like $100 million, because the way that he even came to office was he was like CEO of some healthcare company, which eventually was investigated, I think, for fraud. But anyway, he made quite a bit of money there. And what his pitch was when he was running for governor and then later senator, he's like, I'm a businessman, I understand how the free market works, all of that. And yet what they're quoting is that National Republican consultant who says if they were a corporation, the CEO would be fired and investigated. And it's like, well, I guess, given Scott's track record, kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
The way this money has been burned, there needs to be an audit or investigation, because we're not going to take the Senate now, and this money has been squandered.
Wow.
I mean, blaming it all on money, I think, is obviously code. Candidate quality is going to have an immense amount to do with it. That being said, they should not have spent $150 million. I mean, where did it go?
Nothing. I mean,
if I think
to
back
have all their candidates basically losing.
And if I think back to the Democratic point that I made earlier about how Dems have all this money came in after Dobbs through Act Blue and this the national fundraising infrastructure, and the whole point was they were blowing their money early. Well, then the Republicans blew it even earlier if they had 150. So where is this money happening? I mean, I think that is actually it's a gigantic scandal. Not a real one, as in I'm not going to cry for, I'm not going to cry for big money donors who pay their money away and it was pissed away. But, these things are given to a certain political end, and we don't see a hell of a lot of that. So I think that is a major one.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.